As I noted in the slideshow, I was going to clean up the antenna coil. For folks out there that are new, no chemicals or anything applied, except on the solder to terminal locations, just to make sure we've got a good solder connection there with some alcohol. Otherwise, just a dry, soft brush to remove the dust. Again, the wires used to wind the coils, very delicate. And you can see I've got the gimmick capacitor back in place here, from the oscillator section back to the front section of the tuning condenser, and made certain that I don't have anything touching here. By the way, I did lube up the tuning condenser after giving it a nice bath, so some oil and grease in the bearings, so it's smooth as can be, as you can see across the rotation. Let me get the power transformer mounted to the chassis, and then we'll go ahead and do some lead dress back over to the rectifier tube and get the filament and heater connections made as well. As you guys can see, doing one tie point at a time, just to minimize any mistakes that are possible, which is easy to do. Again, you can see the transformer reattached physically to the chassis, and again, more of the tie points in place, removing the old wiring along the way. I was looking at my cabling coming from the chassis for the 6G5 green eye tube, and everything is frayed underneath the socket, so definitely a safety issue. So I'm going to replace all the conductors and the 1 meg ohm resistor as well. It ties back over to the plate. You can see a grommet installed now, some heat shrink, new leads placed, and a new socket for the green eye, making it operational and safe. Not having a 400 ohm resistor on hand, I put two resistors in parallel, a 2K ohm and a 500 ohm, to achieve the needed 400 ohms. And placing the E-caps in and doing some preliminary voltage measurements. And of course I needed the loudspeaker first before doing any voltage measurements, so removing it from the cabinet. In addition, you can see we've got some problems there. The surround in the cone is loose from the frame. So for me, I'm just laying my eyes on my work for a third or fourth time, just going through the schematic itself for reference and making certain that my tie points are accurate before bringing this thing up on the Variac for the first time. So I think we're at a place now where we're ready to go. Hey guys, as you can hear, I've got the little Knight 98AE-184K playing again. Who knows how many years since this thing's made some noise. It's pretty cool and exciting. You can see the power transformer is back in the set after reconditioning it. I've got the new E-caps in. I'll expand more on that in just a bit. Added a fuse. In addition, I have a CL90 as well between the output side of the fuse and a dropping resistor here, a 12 ohm resistor. My design was to try to hit somewhere between 110 and 115 volts to the primary side of the transformer, just to match some documentation that I had on hand for the particular receiver. Create just a little less stress on the power transformer and somewhat limit the startup voltage as well by placing the CL90 in there. You guys saw where I bypassed the bias cell. I left the holder in here just in case somebody wants to go back and re-engineer this in the future. I went back with a 10 meg ohm resistor. Added the 0.01 cap here, and it seems to be performing well. The bias voltage is just under negative 0.5 volts. The tone control
that was defective is working properly.
Countries each year, and then in a period of 5 years, we've done all reports on all 193 countries. This report was Argentina, Ghana, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Peru, Zambia, South Korea, Guatemala, Benin.
So you can see how the tone control works if you look back at the other video. Again, we're just using the tone control as a low pass filter, and we're just shunning some of the higher frequencies to ground. The IF alignment is not complete, just a preliminary alignment while I was rebuilding the IF transformers. So they need to be adjusted. In addition, the RF alignment needs to be completed. Here's the band selector. Again, the radio has broadcast in the shortwave band. The shortwave band being just under 3 megahertz up to about 6.3. There's no activity on that at this point in time, but I did hook up my RF signal generator, modulated a signal, and tuned around and varied the tuning condenser to match, and it seems to be tuning across the band as designed. So we'll do some additional testing on that down the road, just to ensure that the alignment for that particular band is correct as well. Going back to the E-caps that I placed in, something I wanted to note, I went back with how I found the set. So what I'm going to call the first cap that attaches back to power transformer position number 4 that ties over to the filament itself. You can see in the picture that capacitor is located right here, in the center tap position being number 6. And the second capacitor you can see is tied to the chassis, acting as ground for this particular receiver. So I moved the ground, or what's noted as ground on the schematic, from the center tap back to the chassis, and definitely there was a considerable amount of hum, was more noticeable. So definitely some low frequency disturbances there with the capacitor, this first one, mounted to the chassis. So I placed it back to center tap, and then I brought back the second capacitor as well to center tap. I didn't hear hum, but I had motor boating occur, especially on the lower part of the band. So my configuration is going back the way that I found the set after someone made a modification on the fly. Or maybe there was an undocumented change that was made or recommended from the factory that I couldn't place my hands on. Everything else seems to be working well on the set. I've played it now for about 3 or 4 hours at full operating voltage, and have had no issues. Again, an IF alignment, RF alignment is pending, but the unit is really playing well considering, just with a 10-foot antenna.
So how full is your joy tank? Pro commentary.
Around 3. People behind a legendary nightclub has died. Mark Fleischman, one of the owners of Studio.
Our point today. That's Jack Graham.
That got me from poverty to the...
Let me get the receiver powered off here. And I'll go back and show you my math for the fuse itself, the CL90, the 12 ohm dropping resistor that I placed in. And then I'll show you guys a little close-up of the loudspeaker and some of the work that needs to be performed there. And of course I've got to get the entire tuning assembly mounted to the front that has the dial scale and all that. I haven't even touched that part of the restoration at this point. But electrically, the unit is performing well. Again, you may notice here I've got the CL90. The leads have not been cut down. They're long, and the reason for that is to help dissipate some of the heat itself back to the solder 2 locations. So again, this thing will kind of float out here. If we cut that off extremely short, then we risk having the solder melt around the connection points there, just due to the excessive heat that's created by using the CL-90.